The Donyu is a Qigong exercise that on the outside looks a little bit like a squat, but it's really a great core exercise. So let's look at it, and let's start with a more complex version, and then we can look at a simpler version. So for the first version, I'm going to sink myself down. Pelvis drops to the floor. My spine is relatively straight. Once I'm here, I can let everything compress and expand. Compress and expand. The expansion has to do with the chest moving away from the pelvis and the abdomen drawing in, which is an engagement of the transverse abdominis. Everything gets long. The compression has to do with the chest and pelvis coming closer together. Everything moving towards each other and becoming compressed. Then expand. Everything moves apart. And compress. And you're just following that rhythm of the expansion reaching its maximum, falling into the compression. Palms turn up. Expand up, relax down. Expand up, relax down. The first version, we had a rise and a fall that all happened on the inside. We were staying at the same level. It's a little bit easier to find that rise and fall if you do push and stand up, and then sink and sit down. So it helps find the expansion. But there's something the same doing it this way compared to the first, and that's the internal movement. So we often describe the Donyu as sit down, stand up, same time. What that means is as I'm sitting down, as I'm dropping my center of gravity down, inside the pelvis is rising slightly to compress everything on the inside. And then as I go to stand up, the pelvis is sitting in relationship to the upper part of the spine. They're both coming up, but it's coming up a little more slowly so that everything's able to stretch. So there's a sit down, stand up, same time. But having that push and drop helps you find the inside. So you're pushing the floor, but you're growing and expanding. You're sinking and compressing. Push the floor, grow and expand. Sink, compress. Push, grow and expand. Sink, don't lean forward, compress. Push and expand. So the first version was the most difficult, a little bit easier if we have a stand up and sit down that happens on the outside to help us find the internal movement. This third thing will just be a way of finding the positioning. So I'm going to turn to the side so you can see it. And I want to find the top. So my palms are facing up. I've separated, meaning that my chest has moved away from my pelvis, but I'm not leaning back. I'm expanded. The abdomen is pulled in slightly. Palms are up. I've reached the top. Shoulder blades are relaxed down. So it's just a position and a way of finding that top of the Donyu. Then sink. Pelvis falls to the ground. Sink. Pelvis falls to the ground. Sink. Pelvis falls to the ground. I'm not leaning forward. I'm dropping my pelvis towards the earth. When I've reached the bottom, that's when everything comes together. So now I have a curve, a bow, hollow, My pelvis is slightly tucked under because as I start to stand up, it's going to come back to neutral. I'm going to rise, drop the shoulder blades, rise, drop the shoulder blades. Fully up. Turn, elbows relax, sink the pelvis, sink, sink, sink. Turn, I'm slightly bowed. Expand up, drop the shoulder blades, chest rises, and expand. The last point I want to make about the Donyu has to do with leg strength. The Donyu is not a leg exercise per se, it's a core exercise. It's exercising the transverse abdominis, the diaphragm, the pelvic floor, and the deep multifidi or the deep back muscles, all part of our core. So it's a core exercise. We can do it without sitting and without standing. However, if we're doing that version where we are sitting and standing, we want to have proper alignment. The most common mistake I see, due to lack of ankle flexibility possibly, lack of leg strength, lack of spinal flexibility, has to do with people sticking their behinds out and leaning forward. So now my pelvis isn't able to drop towards the ground. Gravity's not working on it. It becomes more of a lean forward. And then to come up, I have to arch back up. So I lose that piston type motion of the rising and falling inside, the engagement of the core and relaxation. So maybe just spending some time down, straight up and down as far as you're comfortable. If I go any farther down and I feel like I'm going to lean forward, I'll stop here. I can have my hands out and round like I'm in the position for the Donyu. And now, once I've relaxed into that, I can let my pelvis drop a little bit more. By drop, it's almost like it's heavier, and it sinks to the ground, sinks to the ground, sinks to the ground. How far you go is just going to depend on your flexibility and strength. Hold, get used to that position, get comfortable in that position. Then you can turn and slowly rise. Reset. We're going to work on going down and slowly building strength. So pelvis drops, pelvis drops, pelvis drops. My hands are dropping because I'm dropping inside and my pelvis is dropping down. So it's very soft. Just let the pelvis drop, spine get longer, hold, get comfortable in that position, turn, and slowly up. So these are all just stages in training that you can do to get stronger. Use that strength then to find that internal movement of the Donyu.